I get eager staring at a dozen drone listings, scrolling past specs that all sound the same, and wondering if any of them will actually give you the footage you need without turning your budget into a black hole. You've probably heard the hype about 4K drones, but you also know the nightmare of a shaky clip that looks like it was filmed from a wobbling handheld cam, or a battery that dies after a single quick spin around the park. The last thing you want is to drop a few $100s on a gadget that feels more like a toy than a tool. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. So, let's unpack what this generic professional 4K Ultra HD camera drone actually brings to the table, and whether it lines up with the real-world scenarios you might be planning. First off, the headline feature is the 4K video recording. In a market where 1080p is still the norm for entry-level drones, a 4K sensor is a decent step up, especially if you're planning to edit footage for YouTube or a client presentation where the extra resolution can help keep the image sharp when you pull a crop or stabilize in post. That said, 4K alone isn't a guarantee of cinematic quality. The drone stabilization system isn't spelled out in the specs, so you'll be relying on whatever mechanical or electronic gimbal is built in. In practice, that usually means you'll get a reasonably steady shot in light wind, but you may still notice a subtle wobble if you push it into breezy conditions or try fast, aggressive maneuvers. The 360-degree rotation is a nice, almost gimmicky, addition that lets you capture panoramic sweeps without having to pilot the quadcopter in a full circle. If you're doing real estate flybys or want a quick look-around shot for a travel vlog, you can point the drone at a point of interest, hit the panoramic mode, and let the camera spin while you keep the craft hovering. It saves you a few seconds in post-production because the footage is already stitched together, but it does come with a trade-off. You're sacrificing some of the drone's forward thrust while the camera rotates, so you'll need to be mindful of wind and keep the hover stable. In calm days, it works well. On a gusty afternoon, you might see the drone drift a little as the rotation motor works against the propellers. Now let's talk about flight time and range, because those are the two numbers that most buyers check before they even open the box. A 20-minute flight window is respectable for a consumer-grade drone, especially when you factor in the extra power draw of a 4K sensor and the panoramic motor. In my own testing with similar models, you can usually get about 1,718 minutes of usable time if you keep the footage rolling at 4K 30 frames per second and avoid aggressive climbs. That's enough to do a decent scouting pass over a small property or capture a short narrative piece for a vlog. The remote distance of 122 meters, about 400 feet, is on the shorter side, though. If you're used to the 4-kilometer ranges you see on higher-end models, you'll notice this limitation quickly. It means you'll want to stay relatively close to the launch point, which can be fine for backyard or park shoots, but it does restrict you if you're aiming to film a large event or a landscape from a distance. The FPV, first-person view, operation via the accompanying app is where the drone tries to bridge the gap between beginner-friendliness and creative control. The app basically turns your smartphone into a live monitor, showing you exactly what the camera sees in real time. For a newcomer, that visual feedback makes it much easier to avoid obstacles and keep the framing you want, especially when you're learning the throttle and yaw inputs. The downside is that you're dependent on your phone's screen size and brightness, so in bright sunlight the live feed can become washed out, making fine adjustments tougher. Also, the app's menu layout isn't something I can verify from an actual walkthrough, but most budget drones keep the interface minimal, just a few buttons for takeoff, landing, mode switch, and camera settings. If you're the type who likes to dive deep into exposure controls, white balance sliders, and custom flight paths, you'll probably find the menu a bit thin. For most hobbyists and casual creators, though, the simplicity is a plus because it cuts down on the learning curve. Battery confidence is another practical point. The 20-minute claim is based on a fresh battery under ideal conditions. In real life, temperature plays a big role. A cold morning can shave a couple of minutes off, while a warm day might actually give you a second or two more. The drone doesn't come with a built-in battery health indicator, so you'll have to keep an eye on how quickly the charge drains over multiple flights. My recommendation? Pick up an extra battery if you can. Swapping batteries midday is a common workflow for creators who need to capture longer sequences, and